Hey everyone, it's Coach Justin here, and today I want to take a little bit of time talking about risk taking and decision making. And the truth is, this training stemmed from me just reflecting on my journey, my personal development journey over the past 10 years. And these principles that I'm going to teach you today really, the truth is, they're things that I wish I had available to me 10 years ago. You know, it's so common in the personal development industry, coaches, gurus, they'll just stand up on stage and they'll say, buy my program, make a decision. If you have to go into crippling debt, credit card debt, if you have to borrow money off banks, if you have to take a line of credit, if you have to steal money off your grandma, just make a decision, get into my program, and I really hate that about our industry. And at the back of that, we have to understand that everything that we do is habitual. And one of the major focuses, something that we really have to put a major focus on, is understanding the difference between process and outcome. And understanding the fact that we can go forward in the physical world and we can go backwards in the emotional world. And then alternatively, we can go backwards in the emotional world, but we can go forward in the physical world. So let me explain that for a second. Let's say, for example, if you're presented with an opportunity, and the person who's presented the opportunity with you is telling you, make a decision. Successful people make decisions quickly and change them slow if at all. You've got to go all in. And a lot of that thinking and a lot of that teaching stems from this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And in this book, Napoleon Hill, he interviewed 500 of the most successful people in the world. And he wrote 13 principles of success. And one of those principles is decision. So to quote Napoleon Hill, he says, after interviewing 500 of the most successful people in the world, the one common denominator is decision making. He said, the winners in life make decisions quickly and change them slow if at all, where the people who lose go back and forth, and that's a decision in itself, and that's indecision. So Napoleon Hill goes on to say, procrastination, lack of decision, is the death of man or woman. Is what people don't realize is no is also a decision. So you can get presented with an opportunity and you can create a framework for yourself where you understand what your decision making is, and you can create a framework for yourself where you understand, okay, if I implement this decision making framework over time, I know I'm going to become successful. People have interpreted what Napoleon Hill has said in his book, Think and Grow Rich, is the decision always has to be yes. You always have to go for it. And that's not right. So back to my example, let's say someone offered you an opportunity and they're quoting Napoleon Hill and they're telling you that successful people make decisions, and you take the last of your money or you take your credit card and you make the down payment, but you can't make the next payment, for example. You don't know, you put 2,000 down and in a month you have another 2,000 and then you get deactivated. In that moment, you went forward in the physical world, but you went backwards in the emotional world. And the reason why you went backwards in the emotional world is because the framework that you're using, the habit that you created, was a negative habit, right? And ultimately, our habits will tell us our future. Alternatively, you could go backwards in the physical world, but forwards in the emotional world. So what I mean by that is you can have a sound structure that you use for your decision-making process, and you could take it through that structure and you could say no. So it may feel like you've gone backwards, it may feel like you're standing still, but you just went forwards in the emotional world. You just created a positive habit for yourself. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me. Risk-taking and making fast decisions is a vital, vital piece to creating the life that you want to create. And if you're going to move forward, if you're going to grow, you do have to get uncomfortable. You do have to take risks. You do have to, a lot of the time, jump before you feel like you're ready to jump. So I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying is stay in your comfort zone, never stretch, never get uncomfortable, because if you do that, you'll never grow, right? And that's what I call the razor's edge to success. So you have to find that absolute razor's edge where you're making decisions and you're taking risks that are A, getting you one step closer to your goal. This is why having clarity on your goals is extremely important, because it is going to make decision making easier. It's going to make tough decisions easier, because when you have a goal, when you know where you're going, you can get into the mindset of all the decisions that I make have to be getting me one step closer to my goal. Okay, so A, it's the goal. And really, B, it is understanding that you are going to have to get uncomfortable. You are going to have to stretch. You are going to have to make decisions before you're ready to make those decisions. So, I guess you're asking yourself then, or a question that I would ask myself is, how do I do that? Well, step one is you have to know yourself, okay? Having self-awareness in personal development, having self-awareness in mindset and entrepreneurship and growing a business is one of the most underspoken about and underrated characteristics of a successful person, okay? I think it's Gary Vaynerchuk says, it's not the early bird that gets the worm, it's the self-aware bird. So that bird that knows that it has small wings and isn't a very fast flyer has to get up 1 hour earlier than everyone else, then you have to do that. So self-awareness in creating the life that you want to create is extremely important. So it's know yourself, okay? So I'll give you an example. Me, characteristically, even before I started studying personal development, very, very good under pressure, okay? Very, very good at working to deadlines. Very, very good at having my back up against the wall and being able to tap into the best version of myself with my back up against the wall. So that's what we would call in the personal development world being very good at being sufficiently motivated, okay? So for example, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm really good under pressure. You know, I can put $1,500 down in an opportunity and have $1,500 due in 30 days that I don't quite have in my pocket right now. But I know I'll fucking work my ass off. If I have to do 15-hour days, I will. If I have to work Saturdays and Sundays, I will. If I have to not sleep and not eat, I will. If I have to eat beans and rice, I will. There are people who fall into that category. And mind you, this might be a topic for a different story, being in that category has its positives and negatives. So neither category is better than the other. It's just about having that self-awareness to understand which category you fall into. Category B is someone who isn't great under pressure, who doesn't do well with their back up against the wall, right? Mostly people who are creative, imaginative people fall into this category, right? Because when you're creative and when you're emotional, you rely on being in flow, you rely on being in a flow state, you rely on being nice and calm and eased. And, you know, if you have that deadline weighing on the back of you, it's not always necessarily easy to do that. So, you know, you have person A who does really well under pressure, does really, really good with their back up against the wall. And then you have person B who doesn't perform well under pressure, needs to be in flow, needs to be in a calm state. So you've got to know which category you fall into, right? Because let's say, for example, if you're in category B, if you're the person who doesn't do great under pressure, who needs everything to kind of be in line and to be in flow, and they need that security and they need that safety, well, then you wouldn't be making decisions that would put your back right up against the wall and overly stretch you. So it's just about understanding yourself in that position. And for me personally, I've taken all kind of risks in every step of my journey. You know, from back in 2015, when I was a carpenter working 65 to 70 hours a week, I always tell people I was run down, I was stressed, I was fed up and just about ready to give up. At that time, in that moment of my journey, investing in a coach was a massive, massive, massive stretch for me. You know, it was one of the scariest, biggest risks I'd ever taken in my life, right? And that developed into me selling my car, quitting my job, starting multiple businesses and working on those businesses full time. That developed into me quitting those businesses, flying over to America, meeting Bob Proctor, flying back to Australia, selling my house to partner with Bob. So at every step of the journey, I've taken risks, and the risks have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's get into the fundamental of how at every step of my journey, I've made my decisions, okay? So whenever I'm presented with an opportunity, the first thing that I do is I ask myself, what are the benefits of the opportunity, right? Where can this opportunity take me? I instantly allow my mind to go to the positive, okay? I instantly allow my mind to go to the best case scenario. And the reason why I feel like that's important is a lot of people are conditioned when they're presented with an opportunity to go to the worst case scenario. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, you know, but as what I'm saying is that structure and that framework is not something that has personally worked for me. So whenever I'm presented with an opportunity, the first thing I do is I think of all the positives and I think of all the upside of that opportunity. Then is what I do, and this is very, very important, I ask myself, if the opportunity doesn't work, okay, if it is a net negative, if it's a bad opportunity, whether it's me or whether it was the opportunity or whether it was a scam or whether any reason is inconsequential, if the opportunity doesn't work, am I okay with that? Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, if you're presented with an opportunity to invest $10,000 in a business, okay? And then instantaneously, when you're presented with that opportunity, you go to all the positives, okay? The company might be worth millions in 10 years' time. It's going to create passive income. It's going to open more doors to opportunity. You think of all the positives and you get really, really excited. Then I go into the mind frame of like, okay, if that doesn't work, can I live with losing that $10,000? Okay, can I live with that not working? Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to share a little bit of value around how I make decisions. So when I'm presented with an opportunity that's going to get me one step closer to my goal, whether it be in my coaching business, whether it be investments, whether it be creating passive income, the decision-making process that I go through. So the very first thing that I do when I'm presented with an opportunity, I think of the best case scenario. What are the positives in this situation? What is the absolute maximum upside? Okay. Now, I personally do that because I think it's a really good thing to look for the good in everything. I think it's a really positive thing to look for the positive in anything. And it allows my mind to really wander into the positive and what I can possibly create. Okay. The reason why I do this is because previously I would always go to the negative. And when I went to the negative first, I would always scare myself, right? I would really frighten myself out of the opportunity. Then I'd convince myself that the timing wasn't right, that it wasn't meant for me, that it will be easier in 6 months' time or 12 months' time. And all of those things aren't true, okay? So the first thing I do is I allow myself to look at the positive. Then the second thing that I do, and this is really, really important, I ask myself, can I live with the worst case scenario? So let me give you an example. When I first started getting mentored by Bob, it was back in 2015, and his year-long coaching was $7,500 US. And I was living in Australia at the time, and the conversion was absolutely horrible. 7,500 once by the time you converted it was $12,000 or $13,000, and I couldn't afford the investment to pay it in full at the time. So I went on a payment plan which was $1,500 US a month. Okay, and when I was presented with the opportunity, I was fucking terrified. I'd never invested that much money in myself. My paradigm, my mindset was going in the background. It's too good to be true. It's a scam. You know, he's going to take my money and run. All that stuff that plays on in the background. So the first thing I did was I allowed myself to go to best case scenario. I imagined myself creating multiple sources of income. I imagine myself working online. I imagine myself traveling the world and earning money. Okay. Then I ask myself, okay, if I'm paying $1,500 a month, worked out to be about 2,200, 2,300 Aussie a month. Let's say, for example, if I invest this initial 1,500 and all those worst case scenarios come true, can I live with that outcome? Can I live with taking a bet on myself, taking a chance on myself, investing 2,200 for all this good? And can I live with the worst case scenario? And my answer was yes. And I mean, the best case scenario ended up working out and a little bit more. But in every step of my journey, that's what I did. You know, in 2016, even though the material had worked for me so well, I flew over to Canada to meet Bob and to speak to him about partnering up with him, because I knew I wanted to coach people, but I knew that if I wanted to coach people effectively, I had to be partnered and I had to learn from the best in the world. And he said to me he would happy to be business partners with me, but the investment was over $100,000. So I had to come back to Australia. I had an investment property at the time. I sold my house, and the profit that I had made from my house, I invested into partnering up with Bob. And it was, even though I'd created the success and I'd created results with the material and I'd increased my income, it was a fucking terrifying decision. You know, I was living in the terror barrier for months after I did that. It was, at the time of my life, it was hands down the biggest, scariest decision I've ever made in my life. And I remember going through my decision-making process, and I thought to myself, what is the good? Like, what can come of this? Well, one, I'm learning from the best teacher in the world on human potential and success. Two, I'm putting myself into an environment of really, really, really high performing people. You know, three, I am getting plugged into a system that's time tested and proven. Like, you know, the Procter Gallagher Institute, before they met me, were a global company. So, you know, I was not just taking a chance, I was partnering up and I was plugging myself into a system that I absolutely 100% knew worked. Well, what was the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario was it didn't work out, right? It wasn't meant for me. And I put myself back 5 years. And I could have gone back to my old businesses, or I could have gone back to carpentry and built my way up. So I weighed up the two. I looked at the absolute best case scenario, and I looked at the absolute worst case scenario, and I said to myself, you know what? I can live with this worst case scenario, right? For me, it was worth betting on myself and really opening up the space for me to achieve the best possible outcome with putting myself back 5 years. Okay, so that is my personal decision-making framework. That's my personal decision-making process. And I just want to reaffirm something, because I don't want the message to be lost. To grow, you are going to have to get uncomfortable. To grow, you are going to have to get out of your comfort zone. To grow, you are going to have to make decisions, okay, and do things before you feel ready to do them. So don't listen to this and think to yourself, oh, well, listening to this, I don't have to get uncomfortable. Listening to this, the timing isn't right. That is not my message whatsoever. That's not what I'm saying. But as what I'm saying is, to create sustainable success, to create long-lasting, permanent success, it's all about not what we do, it's about how we do it, right? So is what you have to do in doing that is you have to create a positive framework for your decision making that is going to set you up to win in the long term, okay? I have a great saying that I say to anyone whom I'm on the phone to, because it's very common in the personal development industry, where they say, you know, just do it, jump and you'll develop wings along the way. That sounds great, okay? But the flip side to that is you can only play Russian roulette so many times before you get shot, okay? So if you think that the success in decision making is you've always just got to say yes, you've always just got to go after what you want, you've always just got to risk it all, that's fine, okay? And that may work for you once or twice, but in the absolute long term, eventually you're going to make a bad decision, right? That's going to put you out on the street. And you see people who will tell their story and it's almost glorified, where they'll say, well, I've been bankrupt and then a millionaire and then bankrupt and a millionaire and then bankrupt and a millionaire, and now I'm back on top. Look at me, I keep coming back. This person is ignorant of the fact that the process they're using to become a millionaire at that time is not bulletproof, right? So they're rather taking extreme risks. You take risk, it pays off. You take a risk, it pays off. You take a risk, it pays off. You take a risk, it doesn't pay off, you're on the street. Right? Now, it sounds really glorified when you're reading it in a book, but I bet fucking going through it would suck. Right? Putting you and your family, if you have kids, out on the street, that is personally not the way that I want to live myself, and it is not the way that I want to coach my clients. How I want to coach my clients is set yourself up a framework where you have great self-awareness, okay? And you can make decisions that are going to set you up for long-lasting, permanent change. Because that's what we want to create here. We want to create long-lasting, permanent change. You show me your habits and I'll show you your future. So if you're acting like it's the wild, wild west out here, you show me your habits, I'll show you your future. If you make really quick, informed, concise, firm decisions, and remember, no is a decision as well, that will set you up to win in the long term. So I hope this helped. I'd love to hear your opinion. Drop me a comment in the YouTube comments down below. Thanks for watching.